Have you ever wondered why some podcasts continue to get listeners long after they first came out? And imagine if you had a collection of podcast episodes that just continually brought you in new fans, kept your podcast relevant all the time, all year long. Well, today I'm unlocking the secrets to creating evergreen content that does just that. And if you stay with me until the end of the episode, I'll share a special bonus. It's a checklist of the top 10 evergreen content ideas you can implement right away and keep your podcast fresh and engaging for years to come. Stick around.
Welcome to Launch It, the Podcast Maestro, your gateway to becoming a thought leader in your field. Dive into the world of elite podcasting and master the art of influence and inspiration. And now, podcast personality, award-winning author and actress, Anne Scottlin.
Hello and welcome back to Launch It, the Podcast Maestro. I'm your host, Anne Scottlin, and I'm thrilled to have you with me today. If you're ready to elevate your podcasting game and become a thought leader in your space, you're in the right place. And on today's episode, I'm diving into one of the most powerful strategies for building a lasting and impactful podcast. What is that? Creating evergreen content. Whether you're just starting out or whether you're looking to breathe new life into your podcast, evergreen content can help you keep drawing in new listeners, help you build authority, and really amazing, create a library of episodes that never go out of style. So stick around because we are going to talk about that. I'm going to explore this content and why it's so important to your podcast's long-term success. And by the end of this episode, you will have actionable tips that will help you create content that really stands the test of time. But before we get started, please do me a favor, a kindness, and subscribe. Please share this episode with someone else who wants to build a podcast or loves to talk about podcasting and wants to learn more about how to keep their podcast growing long after it's launched. So what is evergreen content? Well, evergreen content, if you don't already know, is what we call essentially timeless content. It's content that remains relevant and valuable to your listeners long after the initial release. So examples of evergreen content. Here's an example. What are some topics? What are some things that are typically very evergreen? In other words, they can be as valid this year as they would be next year. How do we determine that? Well, one, I'm going to use one of the easiest ones first because it's such a universal one, storytelling. Now, whatever your industry is or whatever your topic is, that might affect whether your storytelling is just your examples or if your entire podcast is about storytelling. So fun. But storytelling is something that really never goes out of style because no matter who's telling the story when, it always is relevant. It is always interesting to listen to. And even if they listen to it 12 months from now, it could still be really motivating and inspiring and give them really good information. Other things, think of industry best practices because those are typically going to last for a decade or more. Also, business principles, how-to guides, and anything around mindset development in any industry is always a win-win. And how to. So you see, today we are doing, among other things, a how to keep your podcast evergreen. And again, that's why this will be an evergreen episode. So hopefully that gives you a little idea of what I'm doing right now. Evergreen content is really crucial for podcasters because we want you to continually be discovered by new listeners and new viewers, those of you doing video podcasts like myself. Longevity and value over time is really what you want without the pressure of constantly creating new material. So you will find if you are new to podcasting that after 10, 12, 13 episodes, sometimes you're like, oh, I need a break. Well, that's exactly what you can do. You can take a break. You can have episodes for emergencies because you've already created episodes that aren't specific to the date. Now, we've talked a lot about news, podcasts, and for example, that is not evergreen material. It might become quasi-historical material, but it's not evergreen material. So that's an example of a very unique kind of podcast where evergreen content is less relevant. But for most of the things we're talking about, we want to keep it consistent enough to always be relevant and interesting. So what are the benefits of creating evergreen content? Ideas? Well, first of all, it's totally going to boost your discoverability. It's searchable, it's shareable, even a long time after it's come out. And it helps you really create consistent audience growth. We've talked about that on this show before, because evergreen episodes can really pull in those new listeners long after you publish them. And most importantly, especially around here with the Podcast Maestro, we want to help make you a thought leader in your field. And Evergreen podcast episodes really help build your long-term authority. It really helps develop and establish your thought leadership in your area, and even revenue potential, right? Your podcast ongoing evergreen material can lead to ongoing monetization through ads, through sponsorship, through affiliate marketing. And as long as your episodes can stand the test of time for at least a year and hopefully even a lot more, sponsors are going to continue to find your content marketable. So this is a really great thing to keep in mind. All right, so we're going to talk today about, in this next section, we're going to talk about 4 key strategies for creating evergreen content, because I really want you to know they're so easy. They're so simple. And actually, it's not 4. I think we have 9. I don't know why I said 4, but anyway. Key strategies for creating evergreen content. It's going to go really fast. Because it's really simple, but so many people just don't have an awareness of these, and they're doing themselves a huge disservice putting out all of this energy, all of this time, and only to be able to broadcast it only once, and then they have to crank out new material. So let's look at these key strategies for you. 1, understanding your audience's long-term needs. So this is me understanding that you, a podcaster, or someone preparing to be a podcaster, or someone preparing to come work with the Podcast Maestro, is helping you understand your audience long-term needs. So I want to know what you need. I research and poll you guys all the time to find out what challenges you're facing, what topics really matter to you most, and what are those subjects that keep coming back and back. Those are the ones that are going to stand the test of time. I use tools, I use surveys like feedback, social media engagement. There's such a variety of ways to identify recurring themes when you're reaching out and asking. When I ask viewers like you, send in your questions. When I put out on LinkedIn or Instagram, what are the top 3 areas, or which of these 3 areas are most important to you as a podcaster? What do you want to know more about? There's so many ways, and everyone you talk to in your business, you can be asking them too. By the way, before we hang up the phone today, can I just ask you, what subjects are most interesting to you as a podcaster? What is it that you feel like you could use the most support in? So whatever your topic is, ask your audience continually on a regular basis. Just make it part of your show to identify those recurring themes. Another thing you want to do is appeal to universal interests, right? So focus on topics that will remain relevant regardless of trends. And we already mentioned things like personal development, industry basics, strategies that work in all economic climates, right? Having a savings account is generally a good idea, right? And you can have an episode about that if you're a financial consultant, for example, and you can explain why that's important, whether the market is up, whether the market is down, generally a savings account, and then what percentage of my money should be in a savings account versus investments. That can vary. But again, these are things that will really last the test of time. All right, number 2. So that number 1 of the key strategies was understand your audience's long-term needs, because you're creating an episode to help them long-term. And number 2, prioritize timeless topics. That just has a nice ring to it. That should have almost been like an episode title, timeless topics. So focus on the content that really forms the bedrock of your industry or niche. We already talked about getting feedback from your audience, but if you're marketing topics like building an effective brand or principles of customer engagement, those are always going to be relevant. And there's always going to be new people coming in. There's always going to be established people in your industry that need a refresher or new ideas. So really focus on that foundational knowledge. What is really needed? What does everyone in your industry absolutely need to know, and what could help them? And your formats, your evergreen formats. You can create how-to guides, tutorials, top 10 lists. I teased you with one of those earlier, which you're going to have the opportunity to take home with you later if you like. These are typically really timeless and easily digestible topics for new listeners or even existing listeners as a refresher, but keeping those formats evergreen. And then also, lastly, under prioritizing your timeless topics, really understand the core philosophies of your industry and the core philosophies of your show. Consider episodes that revolve around timeless wisdom, right? And principles that apply to various situations, whether it's leadership mindsets, whether it's productivity habits, whether it's communication strategies. As you know, I also do a podcast with my partner, Lyman Montgomery, on HR engagement. It's called Metagagement HR, just for HR professionals or anyone else who likes to know how to make their team better. And that is what we're doing within HR. We focus on things like leadership mindsets, productivity habits, communication strategies in that particular industry. And those will always be important. At some point, maybe our communication changes, right? 20 years ago, it was pretty much either mail or email. And now a lot of instant messaging, even on LinkedIn and other platforms, is part of that communication strategy. But the principles will even always remain the same. And again, if you can have evergreen content that would last at least a year, you're doing very well. And if you can make it even more than that, more power to you, and you're really doing an amazing job. So we have to take a quick commercial break, but when we come back, I'm going to talk a little bit about avoiding hyper-specific or trending topics. Maybe that seems obvious to you, but we'll just talk a little bit more about that. These tips and principles are going to save you so much time, energy, and effort and money. So really take note of these, write them down, save this episode, put a thumbs up on it for me, and put a bookmark in it for you. Copy and paste this link on whatever platform you're listening or watching today, and shoot that off to someone else who might enjoy hanging out with us for a little bit. We're going to take this commercial break, and I'll be right back.
Picture this. You have worked your whole life to become an expert, a leader, a change maker, but you're so busy, most people will never discover you to recognize your work. Anne Scottlin, founder of Podcast Maestro, understands this challenge. With a decade of Hollywood experience and a proven track record as a business coach, Anne turns seasoned professionals into thought leaders through the art of podcasting. Podcast Maestro offers plug-and-play services, handling everything from pre-production to distribution, so you can focus on your message while Anne and her team manage the rest. Leverage Anne's Hollywood production knowledge, strategic business insight, and social media expertise to amplify your reach and impact. If you're ready to elevate your voice, connect with Anne Scottlin at Podcast Maestro and begin your podcast journey today.
And I'm back. Welcome back to Launch It, the Podcast Maestro. We're in our second half now, talking today about creating evergreen content and why that's so important, how I can help you keep your podcast relevant all year round. So stick by, and we are going, is that a thing? Stick by, stick around, hang on, stand by. Okay, you take your pick of those. We are focusing right now on a variety of really important principles that are going to benefit creating evergreen content for you. And these are key strategies for really creating content that you can use more than once over again that doesn't sound dated. And we talked about 2 or 3 of these already. And now I'm moving into the next one, which is avoid hyper-specific or trending topics. What is that? Fads, trends. Now, if you are a fashion podcast, that might be a little different. Just like we were talking about, if you're a news podcast, that might be different as well, right? But in general, if you're an expert in whatever field you are, in business, in education, medical topics, whatever that is, you really want to steer clear of fads and trends. Now, if you're in the medical world, you might want to be talking about cutting edge technology, or in any industry, right? Just keep it, just explain it in a way that even if you use dates or research, you don't talk about it like it's news that came out this morning. So you don't want to use words like today or as of today, whatever month, whatever date. You notice I didn't say whatever month or whatever date, because I really could have easily done that. You see how you just slip in? Literally becomes not evergreen content. And we'll talk also in the future. You can even, when you make those slips, sometimes there's ways to edit it out in post if you're going to reuse the episode. But it's so much easier, ask my producer, if you can get it right the first time and keep it evergreen from the very beginning. You really want to create a neutral tone again. So steering clear of those fads for that lasting content. Now, this is tricky because discussing current events is really tempting, but it can also date your content. My suggestion is when you actually create your content, keep it as general as possible and away from current events when you can, depending on your subject matter and your theme. But keep those hashtags, use the current event hashtags in the posts you're posting right now for this episode. You can find anything that's even remotely relevant to today's topic and hashtag it in your social media posts and any other search mechanisms that you are using, so that people will find it and find it incredibly relevant because something just broke in the news yesterday that's relevant to your topic. And yet when someone watches a year from now, it will seem just as interesting for the most part, right? So even when you're mentioning new developments, really tie them to timeless lessons. So occasionally you absolutely have to say, this just happened, and Elon Musk, whatever. Okay. So if you have to do that, try not to use specific dates. Try to keep it general. Not everyone's following Elon Musk constantly. And but then move into what that latest tech tells us about, for example, timeless marketing strategies. Don't focus on just the event. Share the event as an example, but then show why it's an example of timeless strategies. So you see what I did right there. Even if you have to mention it, you can at least tie it in. All right, number 4, use case studies and examples with long-term value. Again, choosing examples that have been effective over time, that are rooted in fundamentals of your industry, like classic case studies rather than hyper recent examples, if that's the nature of your show. And if you can get away with it, highly recommend it. And instead of focusing solely on the specific outcome of a recent event, really emphasize, as I mentioned before with the Elon Musk example, I didn't say Musk, yes. Emphasize the broader lessons or principles that can still be applied universally. So, you know, the moral of the story kind of thing. Well, you can do that without making it so obvious. So here's an example that I can't refrain from using, even though it happened recently. You don't have to say that, but then you use the moral of the story, which just demonstrates once again the timeless practice of XYZ. Right. Number 5, create content with depth and longevity. So in-depth content is one of the ways to really stay evergreen, because for many of you, there are already a lot of people in your sphere, in your field podcasting, possibly even in your niche. Hopefully your niche is a little more niched than the niche that they're in, but just saying. So how do you do that? How do you keep niched in and also stay evergreen? Well, go beyond that surface level of insight. Really find content that's rich in information, that's well researched, that offers deep value and really stands out for resources to listen to. You could have something really general like how to promote your podcast on social media. I have an episode on that, which is general. But then I can also have 10 episodes that are specific ways to do that on social media, on specific platforms, using specific tests to see what people respond to, using A/B testing, using a lot of other tools. So this is a way that you can kind of make that content stand out, go beyond that surface level, because people are always going to be able to find the most surface topics in their searches. But what if they need something more specific? For example, what if I have a topic about mics, right? So, but what if one day I do a topic about one mic? Might be too specific for my general audience, but if I did and someone searches that a mic, my topic is going to come up. So in some ways, maybe the more specific you are, the more specific your audience is, and that can be really good for your brand and your business. Another thing you can create that's evergreen is comprehensive guides. Create ultimate guides that provide everything your listener needs, your viewer needs about a particular subject, like the ultimate guide to dating, whatever your show is about, right? Some of those principles are going to stay forever, regardless of what the trends are. And these really become go-to resources for your audience, and they're always going to be easily searchable. And then, as I said before, repurpose and update your old content. You can take older episodes that did really well, update them with some new insights since they've already been aired and pre-recorded at that point. Maybe insert some new graphics, some new examples, and repackage them in a new format, or create a part 2, or add a unique story, or do some audio or video in the field, asking people on the street questions. Insert it, keep it new and different and interesting. Sometimes people will forget that they've even seen or heard it before, which is actually a good thing, even though it sounds bad, because they're listening and watching again because they didn't even recognize it as the same content. And they're like, wow, this is the kind of thing she talks about all the time. Well, yes, because you actually listened to this episode before, but since I've popped in new content and a little bit of different formatting or different teaser, they don't recognize it right away. And then you can recycle. You can turn your evergreen content into different formats. It can become blog posts. You can save the transcripts and create a blog, or edit and modify it. You can create social media snippets from your recordings. You can have downloadable resources. You can use snippets for your social media, for LinkedIn, for, oh my goodness, for all of them, for Facebook, for Instagram, whatever platforms you are using. You can even use them on your website as part of your content package that people can easily access. If I were to take just a few sentences from my entire series of 10, the Podcast Power Playbook, I could make one compiled 2-minute or 3-minute video on the Podcast Power Playbook highlights that I could post on my website, and people get that content. Boom. And then if they're like, I want more on this topic, they go back in and watch your evergreen episode on that. So, okay, a couple more things here, and then we're going to wrap up. So, number 7, be strategic with your SEO, your search engine optimization, and your keywords and longevity. How you hashtag is really important. You need to re-hashtag when you republish a episode, audio or video podcast episode. Again, I suggest you tie in current event hashtags, anything that might be truthfully relevant to your content, and keep it really fresh and interesting. Again, you can also change the topic, the title, not the topic, the title. That can be really hard. You change the title. So just research keywords that have sustained popularity, and so that even your first episode that went out, let's say you record episode A through Z, and you're doing evergreen episodes, even though episode A went out a long time ago, whatever hashtags you used, not just what's popular, but also what's super relevant into your niche, into the niche of that particular episode, people will keep searching for it, and it will keep popping up. And the more people search for it and find it and it pops up, the more those algorithms are going to give you privileges and help make it easier for them to find you and for other people to find you. And, create evergreen series. Consider producing content in a series around a larger theme. Like I just said, my series, the Podcast Power Playbook. You can release it incrementally, what I did, but each individual episode definitely still stands alone and is very specific. You can develop core pillars for your podcast, sort of overarching themes that you return to again and again. This is important for your brand as well, your niche. Don't try to teach every single thing within a subject. For example, specialize in 4 areas of your field or your area of expertise and become that super expert in those areas. Instead of 1,099 ways to blank, say, here are the 4 things I teach, and I break them down into the nitty-gritty, and you will not find anyone else with more detail on this specific area. As I always say, better to have dedicated, high-quality listeners who really love and are looking for your content. Those can become clients as opposed to just generic listens for people who are, you can have 1 million followers, I always say, who don't make you any money, and you could have 10,000 that literally give you a full-time income. So just keep that in mind. So here we are. We're going to go down and wrap up right now. There's so many more things I could talk about and come back to probably for another time. But just remember that overall, the biggest and most important thing is in creating that evergreen content is being careful about how you use, I have to go back and do this one thing, dates and times. Don't say summer, don't say winter, don't say it's snowing outside. Avoid saying it's 110 degrees outside. Avoid saying this morning at 10 o'clock, although you could say that. But if you say it right now at 10 o'clock this morning and it ends up airing at a different time, don't use the day of the week. Don't wish people happy holidays or mention Christmas, Thanksgiving, or whatever your holidays are. Those are the hardest ones not to do, but I'm just going to mention it so that you don't forget. I have struggled to learn that myself and learned the hard way in many cases. So I hope you found this helpful. If you want your bonus, thanks for sticking around. I created a white paper for you called the Top 10 Evergreen Content Ideas for Your Podcast. So if you want to keep it evergreen and you need those top 10 laying next to you or on your screen for easy reference, just shoot me an email. You have my email, contact@annescottlin.com. If you're listening, it's ANNE. SCOTTLIN, Anne Scottlin, contact@annescottlin.com, and just put in the subject line top 10, and I will email you today's list of evergreen content, the top 10 evergreen content ideas for your podcast. Next time, podcasting parables. This is going to be so much fun. I'm really looking forward to that. We're going to shift it up a bit, and I'm going to take you on a journey through the magical land of podcasting. Super fun. With tales, with stories that offer a fresh point of view on podcasting perils, things you can avoid. This is going to be kind of a special, very evergreen episode. I think you're going to love it. So please remember to always tune in every Wednesday on this platform at noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. GMT. And as always, please do me a kindness. Please like, subscribe, and share. Send me your thoughts, your questions, your suggestions, and also anyone you think would be a great guest on this show. Thank you so much. Happy podcasting, and I'll see you again next time for Podcast Parables. Bye.